Have you ever wondered about the darkest, most isolated corners of the world? Places where humanity barely scratches the surface, and the quiet is so absolute it almost feels alive. If that thought sends a chill down your spine, you're not alone. Antarctica, known for its desolate beauty and biting cold, harbors tales as chilling as its winters. Tonight, we venture into one of these mysteries, one recounted by military personnel who experienced something they wished they could forget. Welcome to the Nightside Archive. This episode is called The Echoing Skies Over Antarctica, the Soldiers' Midnight Terror. The year was 1987. A research station tucked deep in Antarctica, so remote that no civilian reached it without clearance, had become a military outpost. The soldiers stationed there weren't strangers to the bleakness of their surroundings, but they weren't prepared for what the skies would bring. The men first noticed something unusual in mid-June, during the persistent polar night. The sun hadn't risen for weeks, and the unbroken blackness played tricks on their minds. It was during one of these eerie evenings that they heard it, a sound that stopped every heart in the base. A scream, not mechanical, not a whistle or a gust of wind, but distinctly human. It pierced the air and rippled through the base like an electric shock. At first, they assumed it was their radio equipment malfunctioning. Surely, a mishap with the external communications gear could explain it. But the second scream shattered any rational explanation. It was closer this time, more desperate. And worse yet, it echoed. The sound wasn't lost to the ether. Instead, it repeated, as though the very clouds were trapping and bouncing it back toward them. Sergeant Major Dean Ashcroft, the operation leader and a veteran, tried to keep the team calm. He organized a squad to step outside and inspect the perimeter. Armed with headlamps and rifles, the group stepped cautiously into the unforgiving cold. The soldiers, their breaths clouding the air, listened intently for anything, any sign of movement. What greeted them, however, was silence. Or so they thought. Private Ramirez, a fairly young recruit, suddenly pointed upward. "What is that?" he asked, his voice quivering. Above them, a sight that would haunt them until their last days, was a shape. Something enormous, but indistinct, was moving behind the swirling snow in the sky. It hovered just above visibility, as if hiding within the storm, but the way it shifted was unmistakable, and with each movement, they heard it, those same chilling, human-like screams. The squad ran back inside, locking every door and barring every window. When they reported their findings, disbelief and tension gripped the station. That night, no one slept. The screams continued intermittently, loud enough to remind them they weren't alone, quiet enough to keep them guessing. By morning, it was as if the incident had never happened. The skies were empty, the winds calm. Weeks passed without another occurrence. The story became nothing but an inside joke, a coping mechanism to laugh off their fear. But then, July came, and with it began what they later referred to as the incidents. This time, it didn't just linger above the clouds. One soldier, Corporal Alan Doucette, witnessed a figure down the eastern side of the base. It appeared as a silhouette, unnaturally tall and gangling, standing motionless just beyond the floodlights that surrounded the station. When Doucette called out, it turned toward him, but didn't move closer. He ran back inside, his description bizarre. It was like seeing a man framed by a black hole. Everything around it seemed to disappear. That same night, other soldiers claimed they heard voices speaking in unfamiliar tongues. At first, dismissed as the product of stress or group hysteria, the phenomenon became harder to ignore when the voices began mimicking the soldiers' own words. It was as if whatever haunted them had learned their language. Then came what the soldiers termed the descent. One fateful night, the power went out. The backup generators failed one by one. At this point, sheer terror had replaced any semblance of rationality. While using flashlights to navigate the station, they noticed frost forming on the inside walls, an impossibility given the insulation. And then, through the thin barriers between humanity and the frozen void outside, came scratching sounds. First faint, then furious. It sounded like claws or tools, as if something or someone was trying to dig in. Sergeant Major Ashcroft, holding the remaining troops together, decided to order a radio call to the mainland. But just as they began broadcasting, the air inside the room felt heavy, as if a weight had pressed down on their chests. The scream returned, deafeningly loud, this time originating within the room itself. Each soldier froze in fear. Not one moved, as the scream shifted into labored breathing and then silence, replaced by the station's damaged equipment sparking faintly. When rescuers arrived a week later, the scene they described was strange. Most of the team were found outside the base in light clothes, as if they had fled something in a panic. Only a handful had survived, clinging tightly to their weapons, unable to form complete sentences. The survivors never returned to duty and were quickly discharged. Their files were sealed. Reports of the event, naturally, were buried under classified labels, but whispered accounts continued to infect conversations among retired military members. Each of the surviving soldiers reportedly refused to comment further on what haunted the station. One chilling rumor suggested that the thing, if one could even call it that, was not of this earth. Whatever it was, it left an unmatched scar on the few who lived to tell the tale. So the next time you think of Antarctica, the land of snow and ice, remember this. Not every scream is meant to be heard, and not every shadow is cast by something human. Once you hear a scream echo in the skies, you'll never forget what's out there. That's it for tonight's tale from the Nightside Archive. If you've enjoyed wandering with us through this shadowy realm, don't forget to join us again. Who knows what other whispers await in the dark corners of the world?